This week on Inside Scoop, is it time up for the Ayatollahs? Assessing Vance's chances for the 2028 nomination. And senators flee for the State House. Welcome to Inside Scoop, where we talk about all the news that's fit to print in our Washington Examiner magazine. I'm Jim Antle, your host. And this week, our deputy commentary editor, Peter Laffin, wrote a piece looking at Vice President JD Vance's 2028 chances. Many in conservative media and elsewhere in the national political climate really believe Vance is the future.
JD Vance is the future, period. JD Vance is the best I've ever met, ever. He's the combination of intelligence, decency, wisdom, emotional self-control. Like, I don't have that. It's incredible. He's incredible.
Vance, who is the second-term vice president for President Donald Trump, has really wowed a lot of Republicans since he began his partnership with the 45th and now 47th President of the United States. We're in uncharted territory with a president for the first time since Grover Cleveland serving non-consecutive terms, therefore making him ineligible to run again in 2028. So Vance, being the sitting vice president, would seem to be in a pretty good position to succeed Trump if the Trump administration is successful. One of the reasons people like Vance is because they think he's very good at dealing with the media.
It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Vance has excelled in terms of pushing the Trump administration message, both on the campaign trail and now in the White House. Vance is also seen as being very loyal to President Trump.
Oh, it said Trump should be impeached and JD Vance should replace him. Dude, that's one vote.
Oh, my God. See, this is what I'm talking about. This stuff is
What are you talking about, campaigning?
This stuff is just not helpful.
Vance is also aligned with President Trump on a number of issues that differentiate them from older forms of the Republican Party, particularly foreign policy and immigration. However, obviously, how the Iran strikes go and what people perceive to be the Trump administration's foreign policy going forward will have some implications for JD Vance. But Republicans right now, according to most polls, have highly favorable views of the vice president. Vance, however, is dealing with a lot of potential rivals for the nomination, and President Trump himself has been hesitant to name a successor.
I think we have a tremendous group of people. We talked about a number of them. You look at Marco, you look at JD Vance, who's fantastic. You look at, I could name 10, 15, 20 people right now just sitting here. No, I think we have a tremendous party. And you know what I can't name? I can't name one Democrat.
Vance is obviously very well positioned, but we have a long way to go in Trump's second term. Will JD Vance end up being in the same position that George H.W. Bush was in at the end of Ronald Reagan's second term, where people will view it as a third term for a popular Republican president? What do you think? Click down below. And this week's cover story, is it time up for the Ayatollahs? I'm joined this week by foreign policy writer Sean Durns. You're the author of the piece. Now, obviously, Sean, since you wrote the piece, we've had certain new developments, but I think the broad picture that you paint still holds. Talk a little bit about where you see things going right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks for having me here. It's often said that, or Lenin, I should say, once said that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen that unfold in the Middle East. We've seen it with Iran. Its position is collapsing in the Middle East, in no small part, as I argue in my Washington Examiner piece, because of its hubris.
So October 7th was obviously a turning point, I think, in this area in terms of what Israel was willing to tolerate. But also the Trump administration seemingly has taken a pretty hard line here and was pretty serious in its red line about the Iranian nuclear program. Where do you see that headed?
I think that's exactly right. The president has been very, very clear. We cannot tolerate a nuclear Iran. It's a threat to us because of their potential intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities, and it's certainly an existential threat to Israel. So the second that Iran decided that they weren't going to take negotiations seriously, I think the course was set.
So it's unclear how much the strikes that happened before we're filming this over the weekend have really set back the Iranian nuclear program, but it does seem that in addition to those strikes, various things that Israel has done have weakened Iranian proxies, and it looks like Iran may simply be militarily weaker than it's been in recent years. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's absolutely a correct assessment. Iran excels at terrorism. It's what they're good at. They're good at asymmetrical warfare. Their conventional military is lackluster at best. I would actually describe it as middling. And I think we saw that on display in the last week or two here. Iran is good at having its proxies surround and attack civilians. That's what they're good at. Air defense, not so much.
Right. So where do you see things moving forward? I mean, Trump has done the strikes. It's not clear whether there'll be additional strikes. There has already been some Iranian retaliation, but it looks like it was largely symbolic. Where do you see things moving forward?
That's a great question. I think that Iran thinks that this is still business as usual. They signaled that with their attack today at the Qatari air base. They think that they can just do these pre-arranged signaled attacks and that they can just keep doing what they're doing without going to the negotiating table and taking things seriously. The president, however, has been clear. There will be no attacks tolerated on American troops, and Iran needs to give up its nuclear program to the extent that it still exists.
So given that this may decide whether the regime stands or falls, do they get into sort of a defensive crouch here? Do they go to the negotiating table? Is there the potential for further escalation?
These are really great questions, and I'm glad that there are great people in the Pentagon and elsewhere working through them. I think that the regime would be wise to go to the negotiating table. However, the regime's nuclear program and its ambitions are intertwined with its very creation. From the very beginning, the Islamic Republic has called for death to America, death to Israel. And their actions have shown that they mean what they say. The nuclear program has been a matter of prestige for the regime. They've held firm to it at tremendous cost. Estimates vary, but by some estimates, it's cost them $500 billion. And that's a sunken cost at this point. And they've held firm to it. So whether or not they're willing to give that up, I think remains to be seen. It's the Middle East. It's not a good place to be optimistic.
Right.
So we will see.
And the administration did offer them a compromise on the enrichment issue. I mean, that had obviously been a major sticking point in any real nuclear negotiation.
Yes, yeah. The administration, I think President Trump was very clear that he was willing to negotiate, and he had put forward one of many offers that the Iranians have been given, and they've never negotiated in good faith, not just with this administration, but with previous administrations. They've held firm to their nuclear ambitions. They've held firm to calling to death to America and Israel, and this is the result, and it's one of the regime's own making.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Jim.
If you're following us on YouTube, you can read Sean's cover story by clicking here on our digital magazine. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are very frustrated with legislative gridlock, leading to a mass exodus from the Capitol, maybe towards the State House. Our Amy DeLaura reports on how many senators are fleeing for governor's races.
3 senators are ready to flee Capitol Hill and run for governor in the 2026 election cycle, the most since 1797.
I think some of it is coming from just frustration.
Patricia Krause, a practitioner in residence of public administration and political science at the University of New Haven, believes the trend of senators transitioning to governors is due to frustration with Congress's ineffectiveness.
Congress has been relatively ineffective, I think, for many years under both Democratic and Republican presidents.
Not every senator's gubernatorial bids have the same political dynamics.
As your next governor, I'll fight for President Trump's America First agenda.
Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville has the most political skin in the game. He's leaving the Senate after only a single 6-year term to run for Alabama governor.
Whether you like him or not, he's very outspoken in Congress. People in his state may appreciate that.
The enemies of Alabama are going to call me a lot of things. With your help, governor will be one of them.
2 others will still have their Senate seats to fall back on. Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado still has 3.5 years left in his current term.
Our best solutions to these challenges will not come from the broken politics practiced in Washington. They will come from us, and that's why I'm running for governor.
If the Democrat loses the governorship, he can just continue his job in the Senate. Senator Marsha Blackburn, an all but declared Tennessee gubernatorial candidate, just won re-election to her Republican Senate seat in 2024.
For some of these people, they run for governor, they lose, they go back to Congress. It's a win-win situation for them.
What may also be attracting the senators is simply the hope of accomplishing something. While Krause admits Governor Gavin Newsom is not the best model of what you want to be as a governor, he does seem to get a lot of credit, good or bad, for the things happening in his state, leading others to believe they can possibly do more for their voters as a governor than a senator.
So I think for some, it just has to do with thinking that they can accomplish more as a governor, which they probably can, than being in the Senate or the House. I think people in Congress can see that, where I can be the voice of the people who actually voted for me. Because I don't think that that's happening right now in Congress. I think the image of a governor is a little bit more positive right now than the image of anybody in Congress.
There are a number of reasons governors are more likely to make the move to Senate than vice versa. They are simply better odds with twice as many Senate seats than governorships. Senators get a longer term, 6 years instead of 4, and the biggest reason, governors are term limited, while senators are not. Krause says this is the biggest reason the legislative branch has become inefficient.
That's why 2 terms as a governor is sufficient, and it works well. And unpopular as it is, I believe Congress should be term limited in some way. I don't know how you do that, but I do believe that it would function better if we had term limits.
The courts, barely discussed in the Constitution, have also leapfrogged ahead of Congress in importance.
Congress isn't doing their job, in essence. So somebody has to step in, and that's been the courts.
Whether it was former President Joe Biden's push to cancel student loans, the implementation of DEI, or Trump's immigration and National Guard fight, the courts seem to be the final decision makers.
The courts have just been relegated to the decision makers because of a lack of decision making coming from Congress. And I do think that Congress has really sort of abdicated a lot of their power. Decisions seem to be made by executive order. Executive orders aren't meant to be ways to make policy. They're usually used when you just simply can't get something accomplished through Congress. The courts have just been put in this position of having to make these decisions. I don't think they're happy about it.
Another possible advantage in the past, governors were long seen as having a leg up in nabbing the presidency. At one point in relatively recent political history, 4 and 5 presidents won the White House as a sitting former governor: Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush. Whether a higher position of power is in view, or simply just frustration with legislative gridlock, staying closer to home may be a more appealing option to those looking to make a difference for their constituents. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Amy. And you can read that story and all the articles we've discussed this week in our Washington Examiner magazine. This has been your Inside Scoop. I'm Jim Antle. We'll catch you next time.